And now for part 2 of the solution, which is public financing of political parties. What does that mean? Basically, it's a very simple idea. It's that a small amount of money is allocated to each political party with each vote. This money comes from taxpayers. It's not much. It's a very small pot of money, really. The proposal is to ban money coming from corporations, and in future videos we'll talk about proposals to ban money from individuals as well and why we need to do that. So the idea is that we limit where political parties can get their money from. And the main source, if not hopefully the only source of money that political parties will get, is directly from votes. And this is really important. Let's hypothetically say that political parties can only get money through their votes. This is a really, really good move. It's a really good solution because it aligns political parties with citizens. They're not getting money from corporations. They're not getting money from wealthy individuals. That means that the number of votes a political party receives determines how much money they make. Traditional sources of political party finances, like memberships, have been declining for decades. So political parties have not been getting money from memberships. Those have been declining. And what has happened is corporations and wealthy individuals have stepped in to supply the funds that political parties need. But this has come at a great cost to us and our democracies because this is a corruption of the democratic process. It means that some voices, i.e. corporations and wealthy individuals, have gotten a lot louder, and now political parties listen to the people and the organizations that give them money, and they don't listen to voters. This has gotten really bad in some countries to the point where political parties' platforms aren't aligned with the interests of the majority. They're aligned with only the interests of the wealthiest portion of society. That's not a democracy. And so if we get rid of corporate financing, we get rid of individual donations from wealthy individuals, and we have public financing of political parties where they only get their money from votes, then this realigns the interests and incentivizes political parties to listen to voters, because that's where they're going to get their money from, right? Some pretty good democracies in the world already use public financing. This proposal here is to take it a step further and say that should be the only source of funding for political parties, so that political parties cannot go to donors, they cannot go to organizations and ask for money. That would be disallowed. Making votes the only source of income will align political parties with the interests of the population, with the interests of voters. It will do so because the financial survival of political parties will now depend upon how many votes they can get, not how many donors they can get. Political parties will have to listen to voters if they want to survive as institutions or organizations. When corporate donations are allowed, political parties that go against their interests fight very hard battles, very uphill battles. So, for example, if a political party goes against corporate interests, the corporations that don't want that party to win will fund the other political party and the other candidates. All political parties and candidates know this in such systems, and so they're very reluctant to speak out against corporate interests because they depend on the donations, or even if they don't get donations, they know that speaking out against corporate interests will cause corporations to give their opponents much more money. It sometimes goes further than this, and corporations will engage in character assassinations or undermine the reputations of political parties or candidates to prevent them from winning. If we remove the possibility entirely of any political party receiving corporate donations, then it really changes what political parties can propose. Their policy platforms can be and will be much more aligned with the general public because they will be seeking to win votes as the only source of income for them. They will also not need to worry about their opponents raising more money than them from corporate donors. So these changes will make a quite radical shift in what all political parties propose on their policy platforms. It will really change what kind of policies political parties put forward. And those policies will all of a sudden be much more aligned with more of the population. They will not be aligned with corporate interests unless those corporate interests also align with the interests of the majority. So this change is obviously quite important. And it's probably one of the most important changes we can make to our democratic political systems. But it must come in combination with what we talked about previously, which is banning corporate donations entirely from all kinds of organizations. The previous video talked about banning corporate donations in more detail. It's very important that public financing is tied to votes and not any other kind of way of allocating the money. For example, we could, and we shouldn't, allocate it according to seats. And the reason this is not a good way of doing things is that it favors dominant, incumbent, mainstream political parties. It also makes bad electoral systems worse. So if you have what's called a first past the post electoral system, where basically there's only one seat per electoral district, those systems tend towards only having two major political parties. It's just the nature of how it works. We can talk about why in future. But if you have those kinds of systems as well as allocating money based on seats, it really disadvantages smaller, newer parties. And for a good democracy to thrive long term, we need new parties coming up with new ideas all the time, because old parties might be stuck in their ways, they might not have the best ideas all the time, and we want new competitive political parties to be always biting at their heels, proposing new things for the population to think, maybe that's a good idea, maybe not. So for a vibrant democracy, you want lots of new political parties. And so if we had the public financing allocated by seats, it would stifle this political or policy innovation. Allocating money by votes could also reduce the problems from other flaws in the political system. For example, if you have very gerrymandered electoral districts, which is when the districts are drawn very, very poorly to favor one political party over another, in those circumstances, if money is allocated with each vote, then even if a political party is disadvantaged because of the gerrymandered electoral districts, they still are going to get money from each vote. But if they were allocated by seats, then the gerrymandered districts would always favor one party winning the seat, and then that party would always get the money. And so this is one very good example of why allocating public financing by seats is a really bad idea, because it can make already bad political systems or already bad electoral systems even worse. Whereas allocating it by vote can make bad electoral systems a little bit less bad, because the parties still get the money depending on the votes, which allows them to compete in the next election. So now there's a problem that the astute among you will have realized, and that is, what about new political parties that have never competed in an election and they've never had anyone vote for them? They have no money, right? There's probably many solutions to this, but one that I think might work is for new political parties that have not competed in any elections before. They can access a pot of money to compete in the election if they collect a certain percentage of signatures. The way it would work is that for the electoral districts that they wanted to compete in for the first time, they could collect a certain percentage of the voters in that district's signature to say, yes, this is a good political party and we want this party to compete in the election. And if the party gets a certain percentage of the signatures, and it could be quite a low percentage, then they get some money. And we could even say that the percentage of signatures that they get could determine how much money they get, because you could think that the percentage of signatures, if it's higher, that they might have more public support as a new party. There's reasons against this, of course, too, and we would have to put in place some limitations to prevent, for example, wealthy individuals from paying people to go out and collect signatures. And that will be part of a future video about not letting people have self-funded campaigns. But for now, let's put that aside. So this would give new parties access to money to compete in elections for the first time. But this mechanism would only be permissible or only accessible for the first time that a party competed. Once they've had a chance to be voted for, then they can receive money from votes, and then they fall into the same funding mechanism as all political parties to have a level playing field. We really want new political parties to come in because they might propose new policies that the established or mainstream political parties hadn't thought of or aren't willing to propose because of ideology or because of any other reason. Basically, we want to make sure that new parties can access money to compete in elections. We want voters to have as many choices as possible, and we want to have a lot of different policy platforms on the table during an election so that people can vote for the policies that they think are best